So I often get asked, what is the difference between a listing agent and a selling agent? And I'm about to go over the difference of the two with you right now. Now, is there a true difference between a selling agent and a listing agent? There are. Now, even though any one real estate agent can represent either the buyer or the seller, most agents will choose who they represent and what type of business they take to grow their real estate career. So for one, as an agent, I could choose to just work exclusively with sellers and only represent sellers in selling their home, getting it listed, advertising it, and marketing it to the public. That way buyers could come and purchase those homes, and they deal with me and the seller. Now, a lot of times a buyer will come to purchase a listing that's listed for sale, and a lot of times they may want their own representation. Now, in these situations, they'll find a buyer's agent or a selling agent that will represent them and their purchase. Now, that buyer's agent will then present an offer to me, the listing agent, and then I'll turn around and present that offer to the seller. That way there's a true separation of buyer and seller. Now, in the world of real estate, we never really want the buyer and seller to communicate with one another. When this happens, we find that deals tend to fall apart and people's egos get in the way and emotions run hot. So we, as professional real estate agents, represent the buyer and represent the seller, and we get together and we negotiate a transaction that's best for both parties. Now, this is not our house, it's not our purchase. That way we're not getting emotionally involved or entangled with the process, and cool heads can prevail in negotiating the best terms for buyer and seller. Now, sometimes a buyer will call off of a real estate sign for a home that's for sale, or they'll walk into an open house, and in these cases, they're going to interact directly with the listing agent, the person who represents the seller. Now, a lot of times as the buyer, it's not the very best idea to talk directly with an agent who represents a seller, because remember, in most cases, that agent either A, has a fiduciary responsibility or duty to represent the seller, so of course they have the seller's best interest at hand. In some cases, that agent may represent the buyer and the seller as a transaction broker. And in those cases, what they try to do is they try to set aside their loyalty or allegiance to either party. And they become very neutral, and they don't discuss topics like motivation for sale or prices. In this situation, it's always better for a buyer to be represented by their own agent. And remember, if you're being represented by an agent as a buyer, you don't have to pay that agent a commission, because the seller will pay a commission to any agent who represents a buyer. So remember, if you're a buyer's agent representing the buyer, you want to make it very clear to the buyer that you represent them and that there is benefit in them having their own representation rather than going directly to the seller or directly to the seller's agent. Now, a lot of times, if you're a listing agent and you're wanting to represent a buyer in the transaction for a listing that you are the listing agent for, in these cases, you may do so as a transaction broker, but just remember, be neutral and try not to get too involved with the process when it comes to how much should I offer or what is a seller willing to take. In these situations, we just want to provide the buyer with comparables of what homes are selling for in the area. That way they can make the best educated decision in submitting an offer that's right for them. In situations where you represent the buyer and the seller, you will retain the entire commission that's being offered for your services as a listing agent. So there you have it. If you like what you had to hear, be sure to subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions or any comments, go ahead and do so below. Until then, we'll see you next time.